So what I wanted to do quickly, start to stand up, are about to announce some membership benefits. In as much that we've got two we're going to announce next week to everyone. The first one being that each member is going to receive a complimentary GC Index survey. The GC Index is fantastic. Gary, Harry and I have recently finished out, and it tells you what you are within an organisation. And what are the 5 things, Gary? It's game changer.
Yeah, game changer, strategy, polisher, implementer, and one in the middle that no one cares.
The one in the middle is like a people's pleaser stroke. You know, the one who holds the team together. It is fantastic. It enables you to understand what you need in an organisation, a team. You know, small teams, large teams, to make that team successful. So we're going to offer that to each Startup to Stand Up member as a complimentary. And we were surprised, just 50 questions, very straightforward. Took me about 15 minutes. It took you less, didn't it, Gary? Just you flew through yours.
Yeah.
But we'll get that sent out and announced next week. And the other thing we're about to announce is we're going to be doing a complimentary one-to-ones over the next 3 to 6 months with each Start to Stand Up member. So we'll book a call and we'll just run through, you know, how things are going, what you want to achieve, goals, any sort of issues or challenges, and we'll send out the details on that as well next week. I want to hand over to Simon now. I first see Simon back in 2016 when he presented to our Vistage group, and he was fantastic. He was really good. It was all about being world class and creating world class teams, and you've done a lot of work, I think, Simon, with various Olympic teams and the British Red Arrows. And my memory serves me correct, you brought a member of the Red Arrows along with you, didn't you?
Yeah, I brought Graham with me, yeah. So it's always nice to have somebody in the room who's actually been there and done it as well, isn't it?
Exactly. So if I can pass over to you then, Simon, and we can crack on.
Absolutely, thank you very much. Morning, folks. I'm really keen that this is not a one-way flow of information, that we can, have a genuine kind of open conversation around this stuff. I will share some slides as we go through, but I'm going to stop and check in at various points, get your thoughts, get some conversation flowing. So hopefully it'll be really interactive session. The topic for today, and I was chatting to Ollie and Gary about this the other day. One of those opportunities that we've got right in front of us right now, I'm just going to open up my screen so I can see everybody, is that the economy looks like it's going to bounce back. I know Ollie sent some stats around on this. There was another one out this morning with the sort of projected growth for the UK economy this year, which compared to normally is what, 6-7 times as high, something like that, as a normal economic growth year. So there's obviously an enormous opportunity within it. The question is, how do we make the most of that opportunity? I am not an economist. My background is sports psychology. And as Ollie said, working with sports teams, athletes, Olympians, but also the best in the world at what they do. That's my bag. That's what I do. So I'm going to look at the mindset side of this morning. There are really 3 questions that we're going to explore. How to recognize opportunities. How can we start to recognize opportunities? How do we make the most of them once we've recognized them? And if they look huge, enormous, potentially daunting, maybe even impossible, how on earth do we take on those sorts of challenges and scale those sorts of opportunities? So those are the 3 questions that we're going to be asking. First one, we're going to look at how we recognize opportunities, but I want to start with a slightly different question. One that when I talk to business leaders and entrepreneurs, seems to be a kind of constant frustration that they encounter. The question is, why is it always you that spots the opportunities? Why do your team maybe not spot the opportunities? Because I speak to lots of business leaders and say, well, it's obvious, I can see it. Why can't they? Just for interest, why do you think it's always you that spots the opportunities?
Is it because you've got more skin in the game, I suppose?
Yeah,
It
good
means more to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thomas, what are you thinking?
You're at the coalface, so you know what's going on the ground. Or it might be you've got the courage to actually voice it and nobody else has.
That's also possible. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
natural intuition. So I talk about opportunism quite a lot because it's kind of on my partnership stuff, and I think that's a big part of. Some people are just opportunistic. You just have an innate ability to join dots where other people don't, and sometimes that's why you're a business owner or why someone else is as an employee. In some instances, I would suggest.
Yeah.
I'd counter that a little bit, Simon, because when I had my business, I had some people within the business who weren't shareholders, who were extremely entrepreneurial. And they would be sniffing, like pigs sniffing truffles for opportunities all the time. It was good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of those myths, and I know it's a myth that founders and entrepreneurs and business leaders have already busted, is that they've got some, you know, magical ability to do this stuff, and that the other people haven't. But actually, when you kind of dig down, there isn't really any magical ability at all. And then, as Ollie said, you know, some people within your teams will be able to do this, and do tend to do this more than others. But actually, when we dig down, there's actually some tangible stuff underneath the surface. For, you know, the first thing that's kind of almost blindingly obvious is if you want to see these opportunities, you have to be looking for them. And the fact is that the entrepreneur, the leader, the founder of a business usually is looking for them. But then you ask, well, why is that person looking and some of the others aren't looking? And if you keep digging down the layers, you look often because you're curious. You know, why does the pig go sniffing out the truffle? Because they're curious. They want to know. They want to find one. And then if you dig down another layer, you kind of get to the point that Gary, I think, was touching on. You're curious because you care. You've got more skin in the game. It means more to you. It's more important. And if you understand that there's like a mechanic to it, you could actually start to ask, how could we get more people to look? How could we get more people to be curious? How can we get more people to care about this stuff? And if we can start to work on that basis, more people will start to spot more opportunities. Then there's a couple of, you know, other elements to mindset, like having the courage to then go and act on them and all that sort of stuff, but at least they'll start to see them. We're doing an event it's now in October. We've changed the date twice because it's a conference, and it's difficult to run conferences in pandemics, as we've just discovered. But we've got an event, Entrepreneurial Leadership Conference, which unlocks this over the course of a day. How do we get more people to identify problems, solve problems, identify opportunities, start to make the most of them? So we're going to explore that over the course of the day. But it's, you know, I think for a lot of people, just understanding there's a mechanic to this, and this is something that we can work through, really does help. I'm going to give you an example of a challenge that I was thrown. So I went out to New York for a day. It was in the January, just before the pandemic kicked in March. Just to give you a bit of context and background, the MD of this particular business, they were based in Manhattan, said to me, my team are currently kind of averaging about $350,000 a year. So they're a sales team. They should be doing at least 500,000 a year, probably towards the million. How do I sort of raise their eye line? How do I raise their horizons? How do we kind of get them thinking bigger? And identifying the opportunities that are around them? Because some of these guys have sort of got stuck in the, don't know where I'm going to find my next customer sort of mode. So we went out, I spent a day with them. Their office was right on the corner of Fifth Avenue. So literally look outside their office window. You've got Central Park at one end. You've got Empire State Building down there. You've got Times Square just over the back. And we stood there and I said to them, we're only going to work on the buildings that you can actually see from here. And we're going to start with one. So literally pick one building and we're going to start doing the maths and unlock the opportunity, figure out what the opportunity is inside that one building. So which companies are in that building? You know, get your phones out, get your laptops out, etc. Let's do the research. Who's in that building? How many people do they have? And because these were sort of recruiters, how many that do the kinds of jobs that you recruit for? How often do they turn over those members of staff? You know, what salaries are they on? Let's actually calculate sort of dollars and cents what the opportunity is in that one building. And they started to do it. And one person got to the end of that one building and said, that's easily over half what I did last year, just in one building. I said, yeah, okay. Now let's times it by the number of buildings that we can physically see from here. And they started to say, well, if we didn't explore any other buildings than the ones we could physically see, we would blow the head off of our target. I said, what if we made it a 5-minute walk instead of the buildings that we can physically see? What if we made it a 1 mile radius? How much opportunity is there? And we did the maths on it, and it started to blow their mind. The amount of opportunity there was just in a 1 mile radius of where they were. And they were kind of, it was to break them out of that mode of, oh, I don't know where I'm going to find my next customer. Well, hell, they could be anywhere, you know, in this 1 mile radius. So it starts to get them thinking about where the true opportunity is, and importantly starts to get them looking and understanding how to look for and then spot the opportunities, so that they can kind of organically do it for themselves. So it's an approach, it's a principle, a mindset. What are your thoughts on that, and particularly how you could start to use that? Because you're probably not on the corner of Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. So it might be slightly different for you. I mean, if I did that same exercise from here and worked on a 1 mile radius, there's only 40 houses in a 1 mile radius from me. I know that there are 2 chief executives that live in those 40 houses. I have worked with both of them, but you know, I would have to apply it slightly differently, but there's the same sort of mindset there. So how might it work for you? What are your thoughts initially? Yeah, Danielle, what are you thinking?
So basically, I love this. So it's just got me thinking about my existing customer base, actually, because what I was thinking is a lot of them like promote and me and recommend and things like that. So actually, I mean, with my existing customer base, I think alone, just looking at them and the opportunity within them to sort of, then, you know, they're on my doorstep and they already know me and they already have a whole bunch of people around them. So it just, yeah, like within that alone, I wouldn't have to look anywhere else.
Yeah. And actually, when you start to look at your existing customer base and think, how many of the different things that I do are they using? How many more would they benefit from? You know, have I told them that I also do this and I also could do that for them? You already see some opportunities. The other one that I've reflected on many times with people is, how many referrals have I asked for? How many people do they know? I mean, I've done a good job for them. They're really pleased. How many people like them do they know who have the same sorts of challenges? Have I even scratched the surface of the opportunity that could be there from referrals before going anywhere else? Yeah. And when you start to think about that, you're thinking, oh my God, I really haven't scratched the surface, have I? So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Starting there is a brilliant idea. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Your social networks.
Mm-hmm.
It works the same with LinkedIn, I suppose, doesn't it? Who do you know, who you connected to, and then outward and outward and outward. Like, they're all there, aren't they? So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Huge untapped potential for most people. Yeah.
I think what this shows is like if the reason why that your employees are not as broad as you is sometimes it can be daunting, and we're told go out and get the world. And I think we're all making a big mistake where we think we're going to get 100% of people. If you go get one of the 100%, you're still going to be really successful. So I think this is a less daunting challenge. Actually, it's a more daunting challenge if you looked at it because there's more people. But if you just say in this structure where you go get that small little bit there, then move on to the next small little bit, and then eventually it's a more structured way of doing it, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So the guys in New York, I'll come to you just in a second, Thomas. I've seen you down there. The guys in New York, we literally said, if you want somewhere to start with that building. then go to the ones that you can see. Then go, if you're struggling, then go to a mile radius if you want, or a 5-minute walk or whatever. But you may get everything you need from 1, 2, 3 buildings. It gives you a really focused, targeted way to do it, rather than thinking I'll go and email everybody. No, just go and find the people you need to speak to in that one building first, and then move on to your second, your third. Yeah, Thomas, what are you thinking? And then Denzel.
I was thinking, so at the moment I'm trying to build a business, and I need to I'm at the very beginning, so I'm identifying my customer base. So identifying a beachhead and geography, like you say, is a really good idea of quantifying a customer base in a locality to demonstrate the viability of your business.
Cool, brilliant. Denzel, what are your thoughts?
Paradigm shifting it. So if you turn around and ask your clients to improve by 20%, they think they have to work 20% harder. If you tell them you want them to work 10x, they have to do things completely differently. So you've caused a rapid shift and a change in what they're doing. So I'll give you an example. A mate of mine went to a company. He asked what the target for a year was, and they said 25 million. So his question was, what does the desk make? And they said 250. So he said, what if I make what the desk makes? He never intended to make that amount of money. He brought in 25 billion that year to the business. Yeah. Well, they were asking for 25 million. And I said, how did you do that? And he said, because I looked for the big clients, not the small ones. So they were getting hundreds of small clients, and I wanted 6 big clients that could give me that huge leverage. And that's all he did. Yeah. And he said, I focused my time on the very, very best of the very, very best, which there weren't anybody out there, which is the paradigm shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's just thinking about this differently, because so many people fall into the habit, and we all tend to, of dropping the blinkers. And then we limit ourselves to a certain way of thinking. I call it a thought furrow. Sometimes we just need to get out of that thought furrow and think differently. Because the thing is, what we end up doing is we ask a question and we find an answer. And what we then do is ask a very similar question and find a similar answer. So we get stuck up in the same way of thinking, asking the same questions and finding the same answers. That's what I call the thought furrow. And sometimes we need to just shift ourselves out of it. Actually, I was with a group of entrepreneurs we did a kind of 3-day event in Rome. And first thing I did was I said, going to take your business and give it to somebody else, and take their business and give it to you, and say, if that was your business, what would you do with it? How would you grow it? And it was just to shake the thing up so that somebody else was thinking about this. I said, you can come up with anything. If you think this business would be best off, kind of being a music festival on the moon, or a television series or whatever, say it, and just to get the whole thing shaken up, get people out of those thought furrows and get somebody else to go, oh, I'd do this with your business. And they're like, what? I never even thought of that. And that's one of the benefits of just kind of shaking things up, seeing things slightly differently, get us out of that sort of ingrained pattern of thinking. Cool. Any other thoughts on this one? Okay. So that's the first question. How do we sort of spot, identify, appreciate the opportunities? Next question is, how do we make the most of those opportunities? And interestingly, just to kind of pick up on Denzel's thoughts a second ago, another challenge I was thrown by a business. This was a major bank, high street bank. There was an area of the bank and a team that worked in that area. Their MD and CEO had looked at one of their income streams and said, the opportunity is 10 times higher, 10 times what we delivered last year. So this one income stream had given them 4 million in the previous year. The MD and CEO had looked at it and said, there's 40 million pounds worth of business here. And the MD, his challenge to me was, how do I put that target in front of them? Normally if we set targets, we go 10, maybe 15% higher than last year because it's a realistic target. He said, how on earth do I put a target 10x in front of them and say, go after that, without them saying, that's ridiculous, that's stupid, that nobody buys into it. How do I get the mindset right? So we started, we had them together for a day, again, beginning of January. They've got a calendar year to 10x it. And we started by looking at what the opportunity actually is. Let's calculate it customer by customer. What could you get? What's the need out there? And so that was the first bit, doing the maths on it. And interestingly, when they did the maths, they said, without being told, it's about 10 times what we did last year. Then the next question from my point of view that's really critical, why is that important? Why do you want to do that? What difference will it make? What difference will it make to you? Now, the first question, what difference will it make, is if you do this, what's the benefit, not to the shareholders or anything else, or to the, it'll make our CEO look good or whatever, not that. What's the difference to the world? And this is a team that kind of loan out money, but they don't loan out money for just anything. It's usually for big infrastructure projects. So, building hospitals and building schools and, roads and stuff like that. So kind of they stepped back from it and they thought, well, yeah, I mean, that's important stuff. Actually, we need to be lending more of this money so that people can upgrade hospitals and build new wards and build new schools or whatever. Yeah, we need to do more of that stuff. Okay, cool. What difference will it make to you if you do it? And there are all sorts of dimensions to it. I mean, let's just explore that one for a second. What difference do you think it would make to the members of the team if they 10x that target?
Is it to do with like financial reward or?
That's one.
I always go back to, I remember being at the bottom of the pile and listening to the top of the pile tell me, we want to do this and we're going to make this and we're great. And I always thought to myself, but what do I get from it? Mm-hmm. And if all your employees are doing that, then you're on a no straight away sort of thing.
So yeah. I think it's got to do with them feeling part of a more successful team.
Okay.
And knowing that the guys running that team or leading that team mean business.
Yeah.
It's a key difference. If someone can show that, you're part of a winning team, you're there to win stuff, win business, and be more successful than all of your rivals. No one ever leaves in teams. Everyone, it's very infectious. Everyone wants to be part of it. So I think it's got something to do with that.
Yeah, cool. Any other thoughts on this one?
You've got that book on the All Blacks, and it was all about accountability and taking responsibility for each of yours. And then what they've done is you've brought everyone in as a team and they're all accountable for their parts within it. And so they're all part of the team, and they get that without them, you've now got leadership, contribution, accountability, and now we all feel part of what we're into. We've all got skin in the game, as you said earlier, or someone said earlier.
Yeah. And actually, when we start to combine these things, we figure out why they want to do this. This isn't a target that's been set by somebody else that they're going to get kind of beaten with a stick until they hit the target or anything like that. It's not that. This is something that they want because, like you said, there is a financial benefit to them, absolutely. But it's more than that. It's about being proud of what we do together, collectively, being proud of what I've done. That feeling of satisfaction, of belonging to something that's not just good, it's really good. That is incredibly powerful. I often talk about motivation being pear-shaped. And by that, there are sort of 4 elements of motivation. One is purpose, why we do it, why it's important, why it matters, sort of the contribution that we're making to the society and the world and all that sort of stuff. The E is to really enjoy this, get that buzz of working in a team, also taking on tough challenges, all that sort of stuff. The A is achievement or sort of ambition. That's the understanding that we're really good at this. We're not just any old team, we're a really good team. And the R is the recognition and reward. And the reward could be pounds, shillings and pence type reward, but it could be recognition, it could be awards and all that sort of stuff. And if we put those all together, we create this sort of magical sweet spot, which is that we're really proud to do this stuff and we're really proud to do it here, proud to belong here. That's an incredibly powerful motivator. So we've got the motivation as well, not just what we're looking to do, but why we're looking to do it, because that's absolutely critical, particularly because we're taking on something that's not easy. So we're going to hit challenges along the way. We have to have this powerful why in the engine room as fueling us through this. Then we said, Great, brilliant. But what we need in order to do it is a really simple, really tangible plan. It's not going to happen by itself. It's not just going to happen because we want it to. We've got to actually put a plan in place. So we kind of went back to our customers. You know, we'd sort of calculated customer by customer what the opportunity was. The next question is, how do we actually make that reality? We know there's an opportunity in there, but how do we get it? And they started to work through what we would need to do and how we unlock that. And interestingly, as a team, they said, if we just go at it individually, if we sort of what I call work alongside each other rather than work together, we'll never do it. What we need to do is we need to start working with each other. We need to plug this bit of expertise into that area of the business over there. We need to help that customer with these three services that we've got, or these three people that can support it. Otherwise, we're never going to unlock this opportunity. Okay, great, brilliant. There's part of the plan then. And we broke it down into some really simple processes, because in my experience, if we want an outcome, we've got to understand the processes. How do we get there? What do we need to do to get the outcome? If we don't know what we're going to do, we'll never get it. And if we've only got the outcome as a target or a goal or whatever, we haven't got much of a chance. And it's an absolute foundation of how I, you know, work with Olympians and people like that. You know what you want, absolutely. You want to go and win a gold medal, but you've got to figure out what you're going to do today in training in order to go and get the medal. What's the consistent stuff that we need to do well every day, the simple basics that we need to do every day in order to get that? So we broke it down into a really, really simple, tangible plan. That's what they were going to go away and do every day and work on improving every day. And I said to them, you know, and goals are, in my view, both really helpful and completely useless at the same time. Most people rely on a goal without having a plan. That's pretty useless. Most people only have an outcome goal at the end, and it motivates, bizarrely, a very small proportion of people. There aren't that many people who are genuinely goal-motivated, goal-orientated people. The vast majority aren't. It doesn't mean anything to them. It's just a number. And the danger was, if we said, right, 40 million, end of the year, that's your target, it's just a number. The other problem is, it looks a long way away for a long time. And so we go, oh, we're still miles away from it. And if we keep seeing the gap and it looks huge, it becomes demotivating. You know, it's like walking up towards Everest, looking at the summit all that way away, and you're knackered and you're walking and you're knackered and you're walking. It still looks like a long way. You might at some point go, oh, it's impossible, I'm never going to do that. So we switched the target around so it became a progress goal, not an outcome goal. So essentially what I said to them is, if you want a goal, let's find a number and say, the actual goal is to get to that number as quickly as possible and then go as far past it as we can in the year. And they said the number is 10 million. Okay, right, fine. So the aim is to get to 10 as quickly as you can and then go as far past it as possible. They hit it by April, and by the end of the year, they've done 39.8 million. So, you know, a shade off of their 40. That's because we just switched around the thinking. So again, we'll just have a check-in. How can you pick up and use some of those ideas, some of those principles? How would they apply to you? How can you start to adopt that thinking, either for yourself or for your team?
Yeah, you've made me think of two things, really. So I've got an AGM coming up, and so I think you've made me think about how to get the team to think about how they might answer this question as well. So kind of like just taking some of the questions that you put and taking that to them and allowing them to talk about it, I think is, and design that. But also I was just thinking about, I really like the progress goal idea. Sometimes I work with gift goals, but actually I like progress goals more. That sounds like a good thing where, you know, rather than go like, okay, here's the big target, like get there. It's like, well, hang on, where do we think, what's the thing we want to get to the quickest?
Yeah.
And then go beyond. That makes a lot of sense in my brain. So that for me is very useful.
Cool. Brilliant. Other thoughts? Again, just think about personalizing this to you.
I like the maths piece. and that's what I'm thinking about from client positioning. So it's interesting what Danielle mentioned about referrals, because that's literally what I help people with. I help people with referrals and strategic partnerships, so third-party leads. But I probably don't do that thing of actually walking them through just how big that particular opportunity is in their business, just from a referral point of view, and then going and finding that simple breaking down of maths piece is something that I know because it's the world I'm in. But I like the idea of the impact that could have on someone if you walk them through that process of just how much it could mean, and then obviously the other questions lead on. But I've not thought of doing that first bit before, so I'll start doing that. I really like that.
Yeah, cool, brilliant. And I think people do need to know how they're going to get there. You know, if you said, look, here's this epic journey in front of us, one of the questions in their brain is going to be, okay, great, but how? And if they can start to literally think, okay, we know that this customer's got potentially this opportunity. How could we start to make the most of that? What would we have to do? Now it's in the form of what would we have to do? You know, it's actions. Now we can start to do some of that stuff. Yeah, brilliant. Thomas, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I get a lot of phone calls from agents about jobs, and at the end of the phone call, if I decline and say, "Oh, do you know anybody else?" I think if we're in a sales environment, it should be a habit where we say to our customers, I'm not able to help you right now, but can I help anybody else in your network?"
Yeah.
It's always annoying to be asked, "Do you know anybody else?" But it's a natural sales output. Is unless you ask, you never get. So it's always a good habit to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. And there again, you might unlock some opportunities you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
Through that avenue. Yeah, brilliant. Cool. Any other thoughts on this one?
This does help galvanise belief in sales teams. So I used to use this progress with my sales team, and if you gave them say a £2 million target for the year, they went away and they came back within a week or two and told you how they were going to reach it and how they were going to exceed it by closing this business. So it's all progress steps. They're analysing their sales pipeline. They're looking at further opportunities coming in, and they're telling you each penny how they're going to either meet or exceed that target. They're doing that. They're justifying it to themselves to satisfy us, the leaders of that business, the owners. It works. So you actually get the sales team to believe in it more than they should do, so they can present to you.
Absolutely. And what it helps break is that myth that I've got to work 10 times as hard. Because most people are thinking, I can't work 10 times as hard. I'm already working as hard as I can. You know, if you're giving me a 10x target, that means I've got to work 10 times as hard. You know, I can't make 10 times the number of phone calls or whatever it is that I would have to do if I was in my current pattern.
Amount of times, Simon, I walk into businesses, large and small, and there's a discord between the management team and the sales team. They said, "We're giving us this ludicrous, unrealistic sales target we're never going to meet." And it's just because there's a lack of clear communication between the two.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Maybe the figure has been plucked out of the sky, but there's no real science in how they're going to get to it and achieve it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So this tangibility for me is absolutely key, seeing the path to get there. And it doesn't mean that plan A is going to work perfectly, but you have plan A. And I think that's the critical piece of it. And if you also work on the basis that the plan A probably won't work, we'll need to problem solve it as we go through, and we'll need to reiterate it. But we can do that because we've got something to work with. That I think also gives people a real sanity check. Cool. Anything else on this one before we look at how we approach the impossible?
You can move backwards from your goal. So rather than, as you just said, the goal is there and you're trying to get to Everest is too high, move away from where you don't want to be, rather than moving towards where you want to be. So I've done this with people that are morbidly obese that can't even walk 10 yards. What we're trying to do is be better than that 10 yards. We're now going to be 11 yards. Now we're going to be 12 yards. Now we're going to be 13 yards. And before you know it, they've walked their first mile. But if you said to them walk a mile, it's absolutely impossible for this person. And then you look at in a month, they're walking 2 miles and they're like, but that wasn't, and they exceed it because it's not what they wanted to be. And they haven't looked at the goal behind them and they've already exceeded it.
Completely.
Great point.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I think progress is really, really valuable. Focusing on progress, because, you know, most people aren't focused on progress, not really aware of the progress that they're making. I mean, I often sort of see our progress as human beings. It's a little bit like watching your kids growing up. You know, it kind of happens so slowly that you don't see it. You know, if the grandparents arrive and haven't seen them for 6 months, they go, "Gosh, haven't you grown?" You know, but you haven't seen them grow up. All you've noticed is that the clothes are getting smaller and they need new shoes again. You know, all that sort of stuff. But you don't notice the growth. And it's the same with ourselves. We often don't notice our own growth because we're in and amongst it every day. So having a process and a progress goal, I think, is really valuable because it shows where you were, it shows where you are now, and it helps you to understand that you are getting towards where you want to be. As if it was set up, that's a beautiful segue again into the next question. How can we take on the impossible? Here's a friend of mine. He's an absolute nutter. He's one of my favorite kinds of nutter. His name's Andy McMenemy. This is him on his 50th birthday, completing 66 ultramarathons in 66 days. When he did it, he established a new world record. Interestingly, that was on his 50th birthday that he completed it. At the age of 45, he wasn't a runner. I mean, he could run 3 miles before he had to stop and do his shoelaces up. And he joined a running club and he couldn't quite do the full 5-mile run with a running club. 5 years later, he's just completed 66 ultramarathons in 66 days. And it was one that I've chatted to him about a lot. You know, how do you take on something like that? How do you even conceive of it in the first place? Just for interest, how do you get to the point, do you think, of even imagining that might be possible and it's something that you would take on? How do you get to the point of thinking, oh, might give that a go, instead of, that's ridiculous?
I read sorry,
Daniel. Go on, you go.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I read a book actually a couple of years ago, which is called The Science of the Impossible. It's like some scientist guy. And I kind of, like, a friend of mine bought it for me years ago and never really picked it up. And it was all about the different types of impossible in science. Like when there's actually like a gradient, there's like 4 different gradients of impossible. And it's like things that we think are like, that we don't currently know how it would be done, but they don't go against the laws of gravity. They don't go against the laws of nature as we currently know them. Yeah. And then it was like, it's the way, and then I think even just breaking down that there were like 4 different types of impossible things that could, you know, and how that they might be possible or why they couldn't be possible. You start to think about how they might be possible. And that really made me think.
Yeah, absolutely. Other thoughts? How do you think Andy got to the point? Remember, he wasn't a runner at age 45. How does he get to the point of going, oh, might give that a try?
Well, my first impression was it's only 4 hours a day. If you got the time, then and you use that mindset, and then just the next day, the next day, the next day. Not that I could do it. I think the geezer's mental, but
well, that's not in doubt. He's an absolute nutter. Don't get me wrong. He's not normal at all.
Did someone tell him he couldn't do it?
Well, that would work for some people. Interestingly, he did have a lot of people tell him he couldn't do it, but he started to understand that when somebody says you can't do that, what they're actually saying is, I don't believe I could do it, and I don't think you're much different than me. That's what they're actually saying. So they're not saying it can't be done. Like Daniel said, it's not actually impossible. They're saying they don't believe they're capable, and they don't believe Andy's very much different. So therefore, they can't see how he would be capable.
Which is a slap of a gauntlet going down.
And for some people, that would be enough to go on, then I'll show you, if that's the way that you're wired. And for some people, that would be a huge motivator.
Is it?
I'll give you a bit more
about anything about maybe swapping one obsession for another?
Yeah, some do that. Just give it a new focus. What Andy did, so when he was 45, he was made redundant, and he found himself kind of in a hole, in a dark place, and he was sitting fishing one day, thinking about all the things that he'd put in his words, one day I'll do it one day. One of those was the Marathon des Sables. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yes. Yeah.
5 or 6 days across the Sahara Desert. It's a brutal event. And he said that he'd always thought that he'd love to do the Marathon des Sables. And he said, I think, I might get the numbers wrong, the deposit for it was 500 quid, and he had 500 quid left on his credit card. And he went, let's just do it. So he's not a runner. You know, that's the point where he joined the local running club and he had to keep tying his shoelaces up. But he really genuinely wanted to do it. So he went to do the Marathon des Sables. And as he finished it, they were advertising the very first Namibian 24-hour marathon, which is about 78 miles, I think it is, up the Namibian coastline. So he's done the Marathon des Sables, and he looked at it and went, I wonder if I could. And that sparked him to do the Namibian. And he did that twice. Second one, I think, was with Helen Skelton, who was in Blue Peter at the time. So he did that. And as he was completing that, and he said, honestly, I was just trying to take my mind off of the pain. He was thinking, he'd remembered reading a book about a guy called Dean Karnazes in the States who did 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days. And he said, I wonder if I could do something like that. I wonder if anybody's done more than that. I wonder if it would be possible. And he started, like I said, just to keep his mind busy whilst he finished this bizarre 24-hour race, started to think, could I get up and do another one tomorrow? And then the day after. He said, no, I'd be stiff, I'd be sore, I'd be tired, but I probably could.
So is he linking stretch goals? So he's got a stretch goal, then he goes another stretch goal, and then it's called.
So what he's doing is he's kind of working from a different platform, if you know what I mean. When he decides that he wants to try 66 ultramarathons, he's not doing it as somebody who's never run before. He's doing it as somebody who's just finishing his second Namibian 24. And I started to think about, okay, what is it that allows somebody like Richard Branson to think, I'll go and start a spaceship company? Or Elon Musk, I'll just go and start a spaceship company. Nobody's ever done it before. It's not even a thing. Nobody's ever had a spaceship company, but I think I'll go and start one. They're not doing it from ground zero either.
Right.
They're doing it from a point of view of, you know, Branson started an airline company. He started a record company. He's been in, you know, trains and Coca-Cola, well, not Coca-Cola, Virgin Coke, whatever, media, bloody, blah. If I can do that, maybe I could start a spaceship company. So they're starting from a much, much different place. And it's what gives them the idea that impossible doesn't really mean impossible. Impossible probably means hasn't been done yet. As Danielle said, that's what most people call impossible, but it's not impossible. We're not talking about breaking the laws of nature. We're just talking about taking on something that we've never done and probably nobody's ever done. And when you get to that position, you start to think about 66 ultramarathons differently. Because Andy described it to me one day as 3.3 million strides that you take one at a time. I don't have to do 3 million strides in one go. I've only got to take one step at a time. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to be pretty and it'll probably hurt and all that sort of stuff. But that's all it is. You know, break it down.
Same as your book, 2 Lengths to the Pole.
Yeah, just figure out the processes. He figured out that there were 5 key processes that he needed to execute every single day. And if he did those 5 key processes, he gave himself the best possible chance. And after that, the only other thing he needed to make sure he didn't do was give up. Mm. And I actually, bizarrely, I adopted the same mindset because I wanted to challenge myself and see where my limits were. Mine wasn't quite as ridiculous as Andy's. Mine was to walk 100 miles in 24 hours. But I did so knowing that I would hit the quit point on the way through. And my little mantra through the whole thing was simply just keep walking. Whatever happens, don't stop. Because if you keep walking, you'll give yourself the best chance. And at the very least, you'll keep walking for 24 hours. You might go over 100 miles. If you don't go over 100 miles, you still walk for 24 hours. But the recipe here is pretty bloody simple. Just keep walking. That's it. Now, there's no magic rocket science to this. I mean, yes, I did 15 months worth of training to get there and all the rest of it to build the foundations, to get myself to walk 5 mile an hour pace and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, that was it. Just keep walking on the day. So it's simple stuff, but we don't always do it. So here's the big question about taking on the impossible. It is only 3 million strides. It simply is just execute the 5 processes. It is just keep walking. That's how simple it is, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Mm-hmm. So what are the barriers? What stops people from just doing the simple stuff consistently?
I love this so much, by the way, because you just reminded me of me and my brother talked about this, and it was my brother's much younger than me, so he's like 20 years younger than me. And a few years ago, I've been promising to write a book for ages, and I hadn't quite got around to doing it, and I knew I was just going to do it. And my brother was studying for his exams, and since the age of 13, he's been studying to get into Cambridge. So he wanted to get into Cambridge on a scholarship, right? So like that's where he wants to go to university. So I was asking him, like I was going, but you know, like how can you get this done? So he basically just said, we just need to break it down. Like, and he showed me his timetable and like broke it all down. So I was like, okay, so I just took that and adopted that for the book writing. And I just like, it was just during the start of lockdown last year when I was like, not the year before, when I was like, oh, I just want to get this done now, you know, I want to get this published. So I did like a 12-week program and checked in with him whilst he was doing his studying. And at the end of that, like published the book like in June last year. So just did it, but just by chunking it up. And he also got his offer for Cambridge this year as well. And through that kind of thing. So it's like, just like, it seems crazy to get to the end goal, but actually just breaking it down into the small chunks and working it backwards, and you just follow the steps and you just got there. So I think the thing that like what stops us from keeping it this simple, my brother always just keeps it really simple for me. Like he's just like, what have you got to do today? Like what have you got to do? Break it down, just do the steps, just do it. So I think, and also I think like having that accountability, like if my 20-year younger brother says, and I think also his belief in me being able to do it is really helpful. And I believe in him. And so that's the kind of like our thing.
Yeah, brilliant.
Day-to-day distractions, Simon.
Sorry?
Day-to-day distractions.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Day-to-day distractions do pull people off of course. But if we start to understand how our focus works, we can start to see why. So focus follows interest. Interest follows what you care about. So if you think about what distracts you and why does it distract you, or when do you get distracted, those sorts of things. If I started to really truly understand this one day. I was sitting watching an epic rugby match on TV. It was the All Blacks versus South Africa. It was one of the best games of rugby I'd ever seen. And my darling wife appears at the living room door, and she said something that sort of the words floated past me, something about bins needed putting out or something. And there was absolutely no way my focus was being drawn from this game. And it reminded me, focus follows interest. Interest follows what you care about. It's the same if you think about it. If you're doing a job that you're absolutely immersed in, it's interesting, it's stimulating, the time's flying by, you're in that state that psychologists often call flow. If you're in that zone and your phone goes bleep, you first of all might not even notice it, but you might, even if you notice it, go, yeah, I'll get to you later. Yeah. Imagine comparing that to a job that's just tedious. It's boring. You don't want to do it. You wish you weren't having to do it in the first place. And then your phone goes bleep. What happens to your focus? Whoosh. What's on there? How many likes have I just had on my Twitter post or whatever? Da, 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 da. And it shows us, it just highlights focus follows interest, interest follows what you care about. If we're struggling with distraction, we've got to ask ourselves the question, why? Why is our focus being drawn from this thing so easily? What are we not connecting with here? because it's true. Most people say, just do the simple stuff every day. Why haven't you done it? Well, because this thing distracted me. That thing went bleep, you know. I didn't get round to it. I didn't have time for it. That means you didn't allocate time for it, which means it's not as important as some other things. So what was more important than this?
I also find people say things like, and I've done it myself, like, oh, I wasn't quite in the right mode or mindset or something like that, like as if we're waiting for something to kind of happen to make us do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And more often than not, actually, all we're packaging up is a bunch of excuses. Interestingly, Danielle, you mentioned the word accountability. I think it is useful to have other people to be accountable to, but I'm also a fan of transitioning this so that we don't need the accountability. We can take personal responsibility. And again, you know, if we think about it, if we just dig under the surface, if it's important enough to us, we'll tend to be responsible for it, want to do it, hold ourselves accountable, all that sort of stuff, because it's important enough. We probably won't need the external accountability. Any other thoughts on this? What stops us from keeping it this simple and just keeping going?
I think it's motivation. Sorry. It's look, if I have an interest, so I play golf, so I'll go and someone says at whatever time of day, let's go and have a round of golf. I'll be up running and do that. Someone says go and cut the lawn. I just run a mile. So for me, it's motivation. If someone's motivated, then they'll be able to get up that much easier. And even if you say walking for 24 hours, well, actually, my thought is, it's not the walk on the 24 hours that's tough. It's actually the training that leads up to it. And that is the bigger challenge and motivation. The execution on the final day on the actual, say, competition or the event is the downside easy if you've managed to motivate yourself all the way through beforehand. And that's the trick, is how do you motivate people? But I think it's, like you say, it's a bit of interest as well. If you're not interested in something, I think best in the world, how will you motivate yourself? I mean, as I said, cutting the grass is not really an interest of mine. What's going to get me to get up and do it?
Absolutely. So when you dig down into Andy's story, there were a couple of points where he could have given up quite easily. He got injured on day 2 of 66. He tore his Achilles tendon, and yet he figured out a way to get up on day 3 and run an ultra marathon. Slowly, yes, but he did run an ultra marathon. Equally, he thought he'd fractured his tibia in his shin. He'd actually, it was the muscle, the tibialis anterior, that he ruptured. He said it was even more painful than the Achilles tendon, but he got up the next day and he ran an ultra marathon. And you have to ask that, you know, what's the reason? What was it that was powering him through? And there were a couple of elements to it. One, he put in so much work to get there, he wasn't going to give it up now. He also knew he was raising some money for charity. He was raising money for a charity called ABF, Soldiers Charity. And the day that he was sort of lying back on his on the massage couch, and he thought he'd broken his tibia, he said the sports therapist he was working with ran an ice cube up and down his shin, and he said he thought his shin was going to burst open. He was in that much pain. And then a double amputee, appeared at the bottom of the massage bed and said, "Andy, what I think you're doing is brilliant, raising money for the charity, etc." And he looked at himself and went, "I've got nothing to complain about. You know, I've got 2 legs. Just, you know, kind of get on with it. Get up. It's going to be painful, but off you go." He said, "My normal 6-hour working day," because he was running at slightly slower pace than marathon pace, "my 6-hour day became a 10 and a bit hour day that day. But, you know, just put one foot in front of the other and keep doing it until you've covered the 50 kilometers. Done. You know, simple stuff, crack on." But of course, there's got to be that overriding reason. And when I was doing my 100-mile walk, I hit a point halfway through where I was in absolute agony, and it reminded me that there are 2 questions you have to be able to answer when you hit that quit point. Why am I doing it? How much does it matter to me? How important is it? How much do I want it? And if you can answer both of those 2, you're likely to keep going. And that was the point where I went, flipping out, I've been training for 15 months for this thing. You know, I'm not going to give up on it now. The whole reason I'm taking on the challenge is to learn how to navigate through a quit point. This is the quit point. This is my reason to keep going, because I want to find out how you get through to the other side. I now use exactly the same understanding to get me through other challenges. I've been writing a fictional book for years now. So I wrote 8 that were non-fiction, and fictional writing is very, very different. And I've got a huge amount of respect for fictional authors, because this has been the toughest challenge I've taken on. It's far, far tougher than walking 100 miles. And I've hit that point so many times where I've gone, oh God, how on earth am I going to improve this thing? You know, I've given it absolutely everything I've got and it's still rubbish. How on earth do I get this to a point where I can publish it? And I draw back to, why am I doing it? You know, I'm writing this book to help primarily teenagers, but not just teenagers, to get through life challenges. That's the reason to do it. Has that gone away? No, it's still really important. I see my daughters and their friends going through enormous challenges, and I know the stuff in the book can help them. So come on, get on with it, learn how to improve it, off you go. It's in its, what, 8th, 9th full draft at the moment. It's about 80,000 words. You know, I've got to the point so many times where I'm just publish the damn thing. I'm tired with it. Yeah, but it's not good enough yet. So don't publish it, because it won't do the job you want it to do. So keep going. And this is the thing that pulls you back to doing the simple stuff for long enough to make it successful. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this and how you can start to apply this sort of stuff to your challenges or the challenges that your team have got? Sorry, Thomas, you had your hand up earlier and I think I missed you completely.
Oh, no problem. There's 2 things. The first one is sometimes you have too many focus points. You're trying to do too many things all at the same time, and you get distracted by one of them and make no progress.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
And the second thing I was thinking, I'm finding it to stay motivated, doing what I'm doing. But when I share my concepts and ideas with people, they like it. I'm just finding it really difficult to actually find someone to help me.
Right.
It's just always a knockback, and it's, well, what's the point? And I think it's, well, I'm going to carry on until I find somebody who's going to help me, or I'll end up at McDonald's. So.
And I think you're right. You sort of, one of those signs that motivation is starting to evaporate is when you ask, what's the point? Because it means you've lost sight of the reason. I mean, literally you're saying, what's the reason? What's the point? Why am I doing this? And that's the time to tap back in to the reason to do it. So I'm looking at time. Looks like we've kind of reached the buffers at the end of the track. Real quick spin round. What are you going to do with this stuff? What can you take away from this session and use? Dave, what are you thinking? Is he gone?
Yeah, he just sent a message saying he was loving it, but he's got a 10:30.
Ah, no worries, no worries. Oh, so he was waving goodbye rather than putting his hand up. Got you.
But I'll go anyway. I think now what for me is it's been creeping up on me for a while, but I realized that I have a fear of injury. I actually sort of had some I've always sort of had to kind of counter my mental health and things like that. So I've always had to have that in mind. And I know that I've suffered burnout on a number of occasions. So I think like what I'm always mindful of is like not getting hurt. And I think when I was running a half marathon, I had this mantra, which is pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And that was that was like another runner, I can't remember who it was, that gave me that mantra. But I think that that's something that I'm going to take away from this, which, like, I think when I put the brakes on and hold myself back a lot because of the fear of that, being too obsessive, getting too burnt out, and sort of sacrificing my health in return. But I think, so there's that. I'm going to take that away and take a look at that.
Brilliant. Any other quick thoughts? What do you do with this stuff? How can you use it?
I love the Pankaj scenario. Golf is a really good version of it. It's one hole at a time. And the other thing is solution. That's what drives me, is finding a solution to a problem. So if you called it one solution at a time, then I think that gets there. And also I think explaining, if you're going out to a team, is no one knows the answers when you say, let's do it. You're going to find the answers as you go along. So I think if you can get that across to your team, then that's important. But also don't just use sport as an analogy as well. So try and find out what ticks everyone's box.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you knew that, then that would be the golden answer, wouldn't it? If you could speak to your team and they all understood it, then that would be great. So it's just getting that across.
Absolutely. So time's up, I know. Little offer for you if it would be useful. We've got a free program. It's called Mental Toughness in 5 Steps. If you think it would be useful, I've dropped my email into the chat. Just, kind of copy paste it, bob me an email, and I will send you the link for it. And it's just a go in, set yourself up with a login and password, and you're in. So yeah,
cool. That's brilliant. Thank you. Would you be willing to share them slides with us today? Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Email them to me, please, Simon, and then I'll share them with the group, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
We'll also send you a copy of the video and share that with the group as well. But that was fantastic today. I think for me, what I'm going to do is repaint this study, and instead of using conventional paint, maybe put my why on the walls, so it stays there as a permanent reminder. I think people are afraid of that, of looking at the why and seeing the steps they need to take to make sure that why happens. I think it's often not looked at closely enough. I think if you're looking at it day in, day out, it's a good reminder.
Thank you.
Any other questions, guys?
That's good.
Good.
Right then. Well,
Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
you're
Welcome.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denzel. Thanks, guys. Thanks,
Thank
everyone. We've got Taryn Hughes on the 21st of May, who's going to be talking. He's from Pitch Lab, how startups and companies go for investment. And he will be working with companies on how to improve their presentation and their pitches.